Hello, and welcome to Ethical Dilemmas in Science. I'm Professor John Hoffman, and today we're diving into a medical crisis that's uniquely ethical in nature. It's a crisis where life and death hang in the balance every single day. By the time this video ends, which will be roughly 12 to 15 minutes, another person will have been added to the National Organ Transplant waiting list. This happens every 9 minutes in America, and tragically, every day, 17 people die waiting for organs that never arrive. This isn't a medical problem of shortage. It's a profound ethical challenge that forces us to confront difficult questions about fairness, access, culture, and our obligations to each other. What makes this crisis particularly troubling is that we actually have the medical capability to save thousands more lives. The primary barriers aren't technical or scientific breakthroughs waiting to happen. They are systemic, cultural, and ethical. Right now, more than 106,000 Americans are waiting for potentially life-saving organ transplants. The vast majority, over 90,000 of them, are waiting for kidneys. Despite significant medical advances making transplantation increasingly successful and a widely accepted treatment, the gap between the need for organs and their availability continues to widen. In 2023 alone, more than 3,800 Americans died waiting for kidney transplants. But statistics only tell part of the story. They don't capture the immense human costs. Behind these numbers are real people whose lives are dramatically altered by organ failure. Let me introduce you to Patrick, whose experience represents thousands of others. Patrick is a Korean American living in Los Angeles, waiting for 6 years for a kidney transplant. During this time, he required grueling dialysis treatments 3 times a week for 4 hours each session. The treatment drained his energy so severely that he was forced to quit his job, losing his livelihood and the sense of purpose. His wife Jessica had to abandon her graduate studies to become his full-time caretaker, illustrating how this crisis ripples beyond individual patients to affect their entire families and communities, altering their futures and imposing significant burdens. This is why understanding and addressing this crisis is so critically important. And here's perhaps the most disturbing and ethically perplexing aspect of this crisis. In many ways, it shouldn't exist at all. In the same year that 3,800 Americans died waiting for kidney transplants, organ procurement organizations, the groups responsible for recovering donated organs, actually recovered approximately 8,500 kidneys that were never transplanted. Let that sink in. While patients were dying on waiting lists, thousands of potentially viable organs went unused and were discarded. This paradox of simultaneously shortage and waste points directly to fundamental on-screen failures. How is this possible? To understand the ethical dimensions and the systemic failures contributing to this tragic paradox, we need to look at the systems responsible for organ allocation in America. The United States organ donation and transplant system was formally established with the National Organ Transplant Act of 1984. For nearly 40 years, it remained largely unchanged, leading to an outdated infrastructure that struggled to keep pace with growing medical capabilities and patient needs. Since 1986, a single private nonprofit organization, the United Network for Organ Sharing, or UNOS, has controlled the entire national transplant network without competition. This long-standing monopoly has led to complaints of complacency, resistance to innovation, and lack of accountability. At the ground level, the crucial task of coordinating organ recovery and placement falls to 56 different organ procurement organizations, or OPOs. Each OPO operates within a strictly exclusive geographic territory and historically has operated with minimal federal oversight or accountability for their performance. Their performance varies dramatically across the country, creating significant geographic inequities in donation and transplantation rates. When an OPO recovers an organ, they must offer it to transplant centers according to complex matching criteria. This often means offering a single organ thousands of times in a single day cycling through potential recipients based on factors like medical urgency, tissue compatibility, and distance, hoping that at least one transplant center will accept it. Many centers are risk-averse and may decline organs that they perceive as less than perfect or that involve higher risks, even if those organs might be viable and could save a life. Meanwhile, the clock is ticking. With each passing hour, the organ becomes less viable for transplantation. Eventually, if no center accepts the organ within a narrow time frame, it must be discarded. Think about what this process means from an ethical perspective. A family makes an incredible, profound, altruistic decision to donate their loved one's organs, often in a moment of immense grief, hoping that this selfless act will save lives and bring meaning to their loss. The organ is successfully recovered. The medical part works, but then it gets lost in the gears of a dysfunctional system. The potential recipient dies waiting on the list, and the donor's family's precious gift is tragically wasted. It's a devastating double tragedy rooted in systemic failures, not a lack of generosity or medical knowledge. The crisis is compounded by significant and deeply troubling disparities across ethnic groups, socioeconomic classes, and individuals with disabilities. Studies show that racial and ethnic minority groups, individuals with lower socioeconomic status, and those with certain disabilities are disproportionately affected by inequities in accessing organ transplantation. These populations receive organ transplants at significantly lower rates compared to their need. Several factors contribute to these disparities. Patient-level factors. A lack of awareness and understanding about the transplantation process is a major barrier. Patients may not realize they have a serious medical problem until it's advanced, hindering timely referrals. Socioeconomic challenges, including a lack of resources or support systems, can make it difficult for patients to pursue evaluation for transplantation. Negative attitudes or beliefs about transplantation, potentially stemming from cultural factors or mistrust, can also deter patients. Provider-related factors. Healthcare providers' knowledge and biases also play a significant role. Late referrals to specialists can occur because providers aren't fully aware of when to refer patients for evaluation. A shortage of culturally competent and bilingual providers creates communication barriers, especially for patients from diverse backgrounds. These issues lead to delays, compounding existing disparities. Geographic disparities. Where a candidate is listed for a transplant is one of the most critical factors affecting wait times and access. Variations in OPO procedures, organ procurement organization, transplant center behaviors, and local rates of organ donation contribute to significant geographic disparities. Certain areas exhibit systemic inequalities that disadvantage specific populations based purely on location. Legal framework versus reality. While legal protections exist for individuals with disabilities through laws like the Americans with Disabilities Act, designed to prevent discrimination, the reality often falls short. Individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities may still face significant barriers that hinder their access to evaluation and placement on waiting lists, highlighting a disconnect between legislative intent and lived experience. Cultural and religious factors also play a complex role. Most major religions officially support organ donation as an act of charity and compassion. Catholicism, for example, views donation as an act of charity, fraternal love, and self-sacrifice. Buddhism generally leaves the decision to individual conscience. However, some specific religious or cultural groups, like gypsies, may generally oppose donation due to beliefs about the afterlife and the need for bodily integrity. Beyond formal religious positions, cultural beliefs about bodily integrity after death, family decision-making structures regarding medical choices, and historical mistrust of the medical system within certain communities all significantly influence donation rates. These cultural barriers are complex and cannot be addressed with simple one-size-fits-all educational campaigns. They require nuanced, culturally sensitive engagement that respects diverse perspectives and builds trust. The ethical question here is profound. How do we balance respect for cultural and religious diversity and autonomy with the urgent collective need to save lives? Is it appropriate or ethical to pressure communities to change deeply held beliefs in service of medical goals? The legal foundation for organ donation in America is the Uniform Anatomical Gift Act, UAGA. This law establishes donation as a legal gift rather than a medical procedure requiring informed consent, emphasizing that it is voluntary, legally binding, uncompensated transfer. When someone registers as an organ donor, for instance, when they're getting a driver's license, they are making a legally binding decision that is founded in the principle of first-person authorization. This means that your autonomous decision to make an anatomical gift is not subject to change by others, including family members after your death. But this creates a difficult ethical tension in practice. When a registered donor dies and surviving family members strongly object to donation, should medical teams and organ procurement organizations proceed against the family's wishes? Legally, they can, based on the donor's first-person authorization, but practically, most procurement organizations try to avoid conflict with grieving families, sometimes leading to missed donation opportunities despite the legal basis for proceeding. This highlights the gap between legal framework and real-world ethical challenges. Public trust in the entire transplant system is paramount and depends fundamentally on the perception of fairness. The values of altruism and autonomy that underpin organ donation rest on the presumption that organs, which are given freely, voluntarily, and altruistically, will be distributed in a fair and impartial manner. When communities, particularly those already marginalized, see evidence of inequity in organ allocation, whether based on race, geography, socioeconomic status, or disability, it severely undermines this essential trust. This can potentially reduce donation rates, especially within the communities, creating a damaging cycle where distrust leads to fewer donations, which in turn worsens existing shortages and disparities. Addressing this crisis requires promoting equity and transparency within the system. While approximately 90% of Americans support organ donation in principle, only about 60% are registered donors. This significant gap suggests that targeted education and simplifying the registration process could substantially increase the donor pool. Addressing specific cultural concerns with nuanced engagement is also crucial for reduced disparities in donation rates among minority ethnic groups who have a higher need but lower donation rates. Recent legislation has finally opened the door to potentially breaking up the long-standing UNOS monopoly in managing the National Transplant Network. The hope is that creating competition could drive innovation, improve efficiency, and increase accountability across OPOs and transplant centers. However, many experts argue that more comprehensive reform of the entire donation and transplantation process is needed to fully address the fundamental problems with organ procurement organization performance, geographic disparities, and systemic inequities. Addressing the crisis requires a comprehensive, multifaceted approach that includes implementing evidence-based policies that actively work to rectify disparities and ensure equitable access to care. Beyond systemic reforms, more controversial solutions are also debated. This includes implementing presumed consent policies, often called an opt-out system, where everyone is considered a donor unless they've specifically registered not to donate. Countries like Spain, which use this approach, have dramatically higher donation rates. Other proposals include rewarding gifting, which might involve providing benefits to donor families, such as an assistance with funeral expenses or even limited financial incentives for living donors. Each of these approaches raises significant ethical questions. Does presumed consent undermine individual autonomy? Do rewards or incentives risk coercing individuals, particularly vulnerable populations, into donating? or potentially lead to commodification of the human body. This brings us squarely back to this central ethical dilemma. Any system where thousands die waiting for organs that are sometimes discarded, how do we ethically balance respect for individual autonomy, diverse cultural beliefs, and family wishes with the urgent collective societal need to save as many lives as possible? Some ethicists and policymakers argue that given the critical shortage in lives lost, organ donation should perhaps be viewed more as a societal obligation or civic duty rather than simply an individual choice. Others vehemently maintain that bodily autonomy must remain the paramount principle, even if it means fewer available organs. When competing ethical principles collide, such as respect for autonomy versus the moral obligation to prevent preventable harm and save lives, how do we decide which should take precedence? As we've explored, the organ transplantation crisis represents one of the most profound ethical challenges in modern medicine. It highlights how deeply intertwined medical systems are with societal values, cultural beliefs, legal framework, and ethical principles. Unlike many medical problems that require groundbreaking technological discoveries, this crisis exists despite having the medical capability to save thousands more lives. The real barriers, and thus the solutions, are organizational, cultural, and ethical. Achieving equity in organ transplantation requires stakeholders to move beyond simply acknowledging disparities to actively implementing evidence-based interventions and policies that promote transparency and truly equitable access to care for everyone. By integrating principles of equity, value, and transparency into the system, we can work towards rectifying these long-standing issues. As we conclude, I invite you to reflect on these critical questions. If you or someone you love needed an organ transplant, what system would you want in place? One prioritizing speed and availability, or one prioritizing individual choice and cultural respect, even if it means fewer organs? Would you be willing to participate in the same system as a potential donor? Is it ethically justifiable to allow thousands of unrecovered organs to go unused and discarded each year when people are dying on waiting lists? How do we balance the legal principle of first-person authorization with the emotional reality of grieving families who may object? How can we address historical mistrust and cultural barriers respectfully while also promoting donation rates in communities with the highest need? The solutions we develop will reflect not just medical priorities, but our core values as a society. I'd love to hear your thoughts on these complex ethical questions in the comments below. And if you're interested in learning more about this topic and the systems involved, I've included resources in the description. Thanks for joining me in this exploration at the intersection of medicine, ethics, and society. I'm Professor John Hoffman, and I'll see you in the next discussion.